Well, we know that the rates of mental illness in youth who identify as LGBTQ2S+ are much higher than when compared to adults. Part of that is lack of access to help. In 2021, the Mental Health Commission of Canada found 60% of LGBTQ2S+ youth had surveyed that they had severe anxiety, and that's when you compare to just 13% of adults. 41% of youth reported having severe depression, compared to just 14% of adults. And Elizabeth Crawley is a mental health advocate. She's joining us this morning to talk about why youth in that community are struggling and how we can help them thrive. Great to have you here in studio.
Thank you so much.
Why are the numbers so much higher for youth?
So it's interesting. It's not actually unique to the LGBTQ+ community. The highest rates of mental illness are actually in 15 to 24-year-olds. But then you compound that with being a member of a minority population, and all of a sudden we see these skyrocketing rates. So, for example, 73% are reporting anxiety, 58%, as you mentioned, depression. And then when you look at suicide, it's just astronomical. 45% of LGBTQ youth are reporting that they have suicidal ideation in the last year, and 14% are reporting attempts, compared to 20% and 9% in the general population.
That's the number I find most heartbreaking. You know, we talked about depression and anxiety. What are some of the other ways that mental illness can show up?
It can show up in a number of ways, but those are the top. But you also see high rates of eating disorders, OCD, et cetera. Really, it's across the board that we see really, really high rates.
And when you dig down into those numbers and you're speaking to youth, what is it that they express is behind it? What are some of the examples that they give you of how it impacts them?
Well, I mean, there's generally the fear of stigma, discrimination, fear of homelessness, being disconnected from your family. I mean, if you talk about the fear of violence in general, the rates of violence against that community are about 1 in 10, compared to only 4% of the general Canadian population. So it's a real fear, it's a real thing. In the US, they just put out a state of emergency because of all of the anti-LGBTQ laws that are being passed there. So we're seeing that trickle over that fear.
Living in that constant state of fear. Intersectionality can also be a factor when you're dealing with mental illness. And again, that comes back to help and how to access it.
Exactly. So intersectionality is absolutely something we need to consider, because really it's the combination of all these minority labels. And so they compound on one another. So all of a sudden you're gay and then Indigenous, or below the poverty line, and they add up and create significantly more disadvantage, discrimination, difficulty, reaching out for support.
All those barriers that can get in the way to help you thrive and survive. In your experience working with youth, you say that they're less likely to reach out for help with mental illnesses.
Only 50% of young people that need mental health services are actually receiving them.
And why? Why do they tell you that they're so hesitant to access help?
So in general youth, it's normally a lack of understanding. It's not stigma. It's a lack of knowledge about mental health. So they would seek support if they needed it, but they don't necessarily need it. But then if you look at the LGBTQ+ community, it's really a fear of coming out, a fear of not being understood, a fear of potentially being labeled with a mental illness, such as gender dysphoria. So all of these are compounded, so it creates an additional barrier to accessing support.
What do you wish was out there and available right now for them?
Free, open, accessible resources with people that are trained to address those issues. I think we need to make significant financial investments to support these people, because there's such a great need. I mean, we just listed off all of the statistics. And then greater just awareness and visibility. We know that one of the best things that can really help a young person is seeing somebody in power, a musician, an artist, a politician coming out or acting as an ally. It's so important that we continue to do that as much as possible.
And you feel a whole lot less alone.
Exactly.
Hey, Elizabeth, great to have you here in studio. Thanks for this conversation.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.